Is this on? Can you hear me? Great. And we've got a couple people next door who are coming right back. Actually, at the end of our last session, the very last question, raised the issue of talking about racism outside of what in the U.S. is often a black-white binary. And when we were planning for today, this issue came up. We talked about how easy it is, also at CTS, to talk about race and racism solely within that framework, and we realize we have a lot of resources right here in our community who can help us think about race in more complex ways than that. And one of those resources is going to be leading our workshop today. Solomon Sudhakar is a PhD student from India, has been here a few years, and is going to, I have my paper turned upside down here, but is going to be talking to us about racism, global implications, and caste experience. Right? So, Solomon, welcome.
I have. Thank you, Dean Stone and Reverend Ayana and CTS for giving me this opportunity. Yes, we had a wonderful session this morning, and definitely race is not just black and white, but it's also beyond that. And today I'll be talking about racism, global realities, implications, and caste experience. I am a student from India, and I also belong to one of the outcast communities in India. So I would bring the caste experience to dialogue with this racism thing that we are doing today. Racism and other forms of discriminating against the other is real and still exists today in several different forms and shades. Svetlana Todorov says the word racism in its usual sense actually designates two very different things. On the one hand, it's a matter of behavior, usually a manifestation of hatred or contempt for individuals who have well-defined physical characteristics different from our own. And on the other hand, it's a matter of ideology, a doctrine concerning human races. The two are not necessarily linked, but they are really related in many ways. An online journal called The Global Issues, and it's the website of this journal, documents and presents a wide range of issues that affect everyone and aims to show how most issues are interrelated. The following information of the existence of racism across the world is gathered a little bit from this material. And also the American Anthropological Association says race is a powerful idea and an enduring concept invented by society. It has also fostered inequality and discrimination against the others for centuries, as well as influencing how we relate to the other human beings. And the Amnesty International documented that in recent years, one of those forms of abuses against the others has been in the area of race, especially pertaining to Europe, often growing with changing economic circumstances and increased immigration to the region. And Europe is witnessing a resurgence in xenophobia and racial hatred. In France, the success of a far-right politician few years back in the run for leadership sent huge shockwaves throughout Europe, and there has been a rise in racist attacks and sentiments against both the Arabs and the Jews in the light of increasing hostilities in Middle East. In Austria, the Freedom Party was able to secure the majority of cabinet posts, and the party is an extreme far-right party. The leader of this party has been accused of sympathetic statements towards the Nazis. Also in Italy, there are attempts to try and deal with the rise in undocumented immigrants from Tunisia, and the reactions of this right wing have been labeled by some as being extremely racist and openly racist. Spain also has seen increased racial violence. The growing economy invites immigrants from North African countries such as Morocco. However, poor conditions that immigrants have had to endure and the already racially charged region has led to friction and confrontations. Also in 1997, the Human Rights Watch noted that the United Kingdom has one of the highest levels of racially motivated violence and harassment in Western Europe, and the problem is still getting worse. Greece has one of the worst records in European Union for racism against ethnic minorities, according to BBC. Anti-immigrant sentiment has long been high, especially against ethnic Albanians, who form the largest minority. Russia has also seen violent anti-racism on the rise in the recent years, together with the rise of neo-Nazism. Australia also had a very racist past in which apartheid has been practiced and where indigenous aboriginals people have lost almost all their land and suffered many prejudices. Today, it's against the Asians, particularly the Indian community in Australia, who are facing these attacks. In Zimbabwe, there has been increasing racism against the white farmers due to poverty and lack of land ownership by the Africans. And in South Africa, until recently, we all know that it suffered from apartheid, which legally segregated the African populations from the Europeans. In Cambodia, there had been strong anti-Vietnamese sentiment, and in Indonesia, there has been a lot of violence against the affluent Chinese populations. And in India, there has been a long discrimination against what is considered the lowest caste or class in Hinduism, against the Dalits or the untouchables, as we also see sectarian as well as religious violence. Caste system is much more worse than the effects of racism. Here, discrimination against the other is not only between different races, but discrimination against the other, even within the same race, is evident. And I would like to present a little bit about the Indian caste system and the Dalit experience. Now, Indian social structure is fundamentally rooted in caste system, and over 250 million people are not grouped within the caste structure. These people are considered outcasts or untouchables, and one of the very influential Dalit theologians, Dr. M.E. Prabhakar, in the following words, he summarizes the multiple oppressions of the Dalits, and I quote, "Dalits have been the most degraded, downtrodden, exploited, and the least educated in our society. They have been socially and culturally and economically and politically subjugated and marginalized through 3,000 years of our history, and remain so. Even after half a century of protective discrimination, even today they are denied individual and social identity, self-respect and status, and the Dalits form the inner core of poverty," end quote. Caste-based discrimination against the Dalits, motivated by the purity and the pollution sentiment, is on the rise in contemporary India. A great degree of economic inequality, social dislocation, and many forms of discrimination continue to increase, especially affecting the already marginalized communities like the Dalits of the Indian social structure. Recent trends of economic liberalization and globalization have also discriminated against and marginalized these communities in terms of employment and participation. Today, I will first explain the realities of caste and its ramifications for Indian society and the related dialectics of purity and pollution within and through caste structures. The caste system in India is a complex structuring of social groups based on ritual of purity and pollution. This is a system in which communities are estranged, alienated, and exploited. The earliest religious documents of Indian history, such as the Rig Veda and the Manusmriti, narrate that the Hindu society was divided into 4 categories or varnas. Varnas, again, it refers to the color, varnashrama dharma, we call it, and they are associated with particular social occupations. And within these 4 categories are the Brahmins, who are the priests or the teachers, the Kshatriyas, the ruler or the warrior, the Vaishyas, the traders, who are the traders, and the Shudras, who are the servants. This is a hierarchical structure with Brahmins at the top and the Shudra or the servant class at the bottom. And if you look at this hierarchy, the Varnas, you also see that on the Brahmins are associated with as being fair and the Shudras as dark. So it is in that way. And the people who are left out of this system of hierarchy of caste altogether are termed as outcasts, and because of their vocation involving cleaning of night soil, removal of dead animals, and eating of meat, particularly beef, they are considered polluted and therefore untouchables. These groups are also termed as Chandalas. The Harper's Dictionary of Hinduism defines Chandala as in the following way. It says, Chandalas are prohibited even from seeing the food offered at the Shraddha or during worship times. They are required to live outside towns or villages. And regarding these outcast groups, Max Weber also states that these are the castes that are considered unclean. All temples are closed for them, and no Brahmin or no Barber will come forward to serve them. They must live outside the village district, and they infect or pollute either by touch or in South India, from the place that I come from, even by their presence at a distance. And contact of any sort, therefore, with the untouchable results in pollution of oneself and is considered so serious that a touch requires a ritualistic purification by the high caste person. And this pollution and impurities are also of 2 kinds, a temporal and a permanent pollution. A temporal or a daily pollution can arise from the secretions of the body, and a process of ritual bath can purify a polluted person. In addition, pollution due to birth and death and the menstruation cycle of a woman are temporal and also can be purified. Jürgens Meyer, who has done a lot of work on caste in India, notes that certain materials are thought to create adverse karmic effects when one comes into contact with them. For example, pollution from an untouchable, he says, is particularly serious, and it is also considered and practiced in many villages even today. The untouchables are permanently polluted people, and their status is said to arise from the work they perform, such as skinning animal carcasses, tanning leather, making shoes, and removal of human waste. And these are some of the principal grounds for these communities, people to become permanently polluted people. And the polluting of the high caste people can occur not only by physical contact, but also through proximity and immediacy by the permanently polluted untouchables. So, for that reason, any contact with untouchables is seriously prohibited. And the dichotomy of this ritual of purity and pollution has subjected the Dalits to many socio-religious, economic, as well as political disabilities. They continue to remain the most oppressed and exploited people in the Indian society. And another Indian Dalit theologian, Dr. J.S. Ratnam, in his article, he states in his article Towards a Dalit Liberative Hermeneutics, he states that the term Dalit that these communities have taken up by discarding a term that Gandhi gave to these communities, calling them Harijan, which the Dalit communities rejected, and they no more use that word Harijan. Harijan means children of God. And the Dalit community in India said, of course, all of us are children of God, but that doesn't talk about our existential situation. We have been discriminated against and subjugated to this form of almost like slavery for 3,000 years, and this word doesn't make any sense for us, so we don't want. And they have taken up this word Dalit, a Dalit which is derived from a Sanskrit root dal, which means to crack open or split or crushed. And the term is widely accepted by these outcast, untouchable groups in India in their struggle for justice and equality. Today, there are millions of Dalits who are directly or indirectly affected in terms of exclusion, marginalization, and exploitation within the social structure based on a presumed hierarchy of inherited ritual purity. The discrimination against Dalits, as discussed earlier, is strongly rooted in the culture and supported by religious structures. Today, we find the same phenomena in several different forms and implicitly supported by governments and institutions. And in the light of all this, I'd like to talk few minutes about the Christian response and the Indian Christian and also Dalit theological exercises in India. Indian Christian theology until the 1970s was driven by high caste converts to Christianity. Dalits and other marginalized communities had little access to seminaries and other educational institutions. Therefore, Indian Christian theology as such had little significance to the realities of the outcast communities in India. Most theologians expounded on the relevance of Jesus to the Indian situation by working on Christological themes supported by the concepts and philosophies of the Hindu Brahmanical traditions. But the majority of Christian population in India today belongs to the outcast Dalit community, and none of these theologies that belong to the Brahmanical traditions proved meaningful to them. In the 1970s, however, witnessed the emergence of theological works by few Dalit theologians, particularly people like Arvind P. Nirmal, who is considered as the father of Dalit theology. And Nirmal is the first theologian in India to engage Dalit struggles and experiences in constructing a theology with liberation motives. Nirmal states that Christian Dalit theology will be produced by Dalits. It is based on their own Dalit experiences, their own sufferings, their own aspirations, and their own hopes. It will narrate the story of their pathos and their protest against socio-economic injustices they have been subjugated to throughout history. And he continues to say that it will anticipate liberation which is meaningful to these communities. In other words, the context and real life experiences of being discriminated against and experiences of being stripped of their essential human essence directly inform their theological exercises. As much as I agree with Nirmal's stance on doing theology from a Dalit perspective, I also consider doing theology inclusively and from an interdisciplinary approach, which I considered as critical because such an approach is pregnant, I believe, with profound possibilities. This approach, I believe, encourages engagement and solidarity with other marginalized communities and their own theological discussions, and I believe that it can lead to formulating a theology or theologies that benefit all and will enhance coalitions between different groups as it is happening today. And in a world divided on the basis of race, caste, class, and gender, and a world divided on the basis of purity and pollution, a world divided on the basis of ignorance, intolerance, insecurity, and greed can be transformed. I believe even though it is difficult, that I believe that humans can overcome these divisions and have structures transformed and through the assertion and acceptance of inherent human essence in everybody. My theological exercise here at CTS is to construct and formulate a theology, a Christology that is focused around Dalit liberation. It will aid, which I believe the Dalit Liberation Project. I am also struggling to offer a liberative theology, Christology, which emphasizes the shared human essence of all human beings. And I offer it as a response to Dalit people's tears and pains of having been discriminated against for centuries and having been looked upon as polluted. It is my cry and also my search for acceptance and restoration of the shared human essence of all. At the same time, it will also be a prophetic calling for equality, justice, equal participation, a call that is inspired by the words of Professor Arvind A. Nirmal when he says, "We need a mighty hand, an outstretched arm, and a certain measure of terror. In short, we need an activist struggle for liberation, a movement informed by its action towards its theological reflection. Our pathos should give birth to our protest, a very loud protest. Our protest should be so loud that the walls of Brahmanism should come tumbling down. A Christian Dalit theology will not be a passive theology. Today, in our own context, our theological voices, our shared protests and consciousness should be so loud and should be so forceful that the walls of racism, the walls of gender disparities and sexualities, of economic inequalities and opportunities should come tumbling down." Thank you.
Many thanks to Solomon.
Thank you.
As we get ready for Q&A, I want to invite you to come up just a little bit so we can have a less spread out conversation. If we can just center towards the middle. Nick, is it okay if we're all on this side, or do you want us to be spread between the two sides?
Yeah. Spreading out a little bit helps just with not just back to the head. So even if you're towards the outside of the
Yeah, so if you just move up a little bit and into the first three rows, let's say, on either side.
So Solomon, I have a question. As you're describing the Dalit outcast, the outcast system, you said two different things. So if you could first clarify, it seemed like there was a temporal impurity that happened and a permanent.
Yes.
The temporal, interesting to my Western brain, the temporal was bodily, and the permanent was vocation.
Yes.
And I just find that to be an interesting dynamic. And if you could talk about that a little bit more and maybe clarify that some. And also, how does that then apply to the Christological piece as far as, I think, purity and danger, but maybe however you look at that, and Christology, which may or may not be bodily, and how you employ that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I presented the Indian caste system in a very small nutshell. It is so huge. Definitely, pollution is of two kinds. The temporal is bodily secretions and other touch and other things which can be ritually purified. And how it acts in society even today. For example, I am a Dalit. I worked as a Dalit pastor in villages, and even in villages, if you go to a tea stall, you have two sets of cups and glasses and things like that, where one set is for the high caste and the other thing is for the low caste, who use them, wash them, and keep them there. And if I touch Ayana, she immediately thinks that she is polluted until she goes through a ritualistic bath. And the other permanent pollution is definitely out of vocation. Caste system originally, in the Manusmriti and the Vedas, when you look at the origins of caste, it is a social structuring based on vocations. On top, it's the priestly class, followed by the warrior, traders, and servant class. And it is their vocations. And though there are the whole people who are not in the system, they are considered outcasts. And even the place where they live, if you look at a traditional Indian village, the center of the village is the temple by the rulers in the next, and followed by the traders and the servant, and the outcast groups are at the periphery of the villages. And they are allowed into the village, the outcast groups, only when there is a need to clear a dead carcass, an animal, or they are allowed to enter the village to clean the human waste or the night soil. And because of the work that they did, because of the jobs that they involved in cleaning up these things, the dead animals and the human waste are considered polluted. And these people, because they work with them, because of their work, they also became polluted. And that led to their being permanently polluted community. So that's how. And did I answer?
And then in doing your Christology, how does that sort of perception of pollution that stays and pollution that leaves, does that fit in how you're...
Yeah, what I am struggling here is because the Indian Christian theology till the 1970s, by the high caste convert Christians, most of them, they engaged in creating or developing Indian Christian Christology, where Jesus is either considered as a yogi or as an avatar or as something else that reinforced their Brahminical traditions and cultures and their thing. And this Brahminical Christ had no meaning for many of us because he is still a high caste Christ, which, so I am trying to work and develop or bring some change in the Christology or of Christ. And I am doing an interdisciplinary work using Marxist theory and other things where the concept of species being, which is a big thing for which it is a lot of thing to explain right now, but that is a concept which promotes the human essence, and that is being applied to the Christ concept for the benefit and liberation of the Dalits and other marginalized communities. That's my hope. I don't know it works out, but yeah.
Well, this again from a Western perspective, but I thought that since Gandhi's time, the caste system had been made illegal, number one. So could you comment on that? And number two, so what are people doing, or what are governments doing, or social workers, or somebody working with the different caste, et cetera, to get rid of the whole idea or the concept or whatever?
In 1947, when India got independence from the British, it was also at that time we had the new Indian Constitution developed, and the father of the Indian Constitution, or the main person behind making Indian Constitution, is Dr. Ambedkar, who himself is a Dalit, and who was very vital in bringing or making discrimination against the other person based on caste, making it illegal and unconstitutional. So since 1947, caste-based discrimination is illegal and unconstitutional. But this is a system that existed in that society, that part of the world, since thousands of years. And it is only 60 or 65 years now. And it is hard to remove from people's mind. Education and all this modernization and things like that are helping in reducing, and especially the village structures that I talked about earlier, the village structure. These days, with all the development that is happening and with the concept of apartments and condos, you don't know who is living next. But questions about the caste comes when we start moving towards a social relationship. For example, a marriage or things like that. And compatibility, India still has arranged marriage system very active. And first thing they ask is what caste. And if the caste compatibility is there, then they will take the next step. So caste-based discrimination is illegal and unconstitutional since 1947, but it still exists in many different forms even today. And the role of Gandhi is the father of Indian nation, and he did a lot of work. But at the same time, many of the Dalits, they don't really feel connected to Gandhi, because Gandhi at a time had the power and capacity to just remove the whole system of caste from the Indian anything. But he wanted to retain the system of caste in the Indian society, because he kept saying that it is the structuring of the society, and for the smooth thing of the society, we still have to retain the system of caste. Instead, we need to become persons where we can embrace in spite of all that, which is not practical. And he gave this name, Harijan, which many, including me, think and consider makes no sense. To be called a child of God and at the same time being subjected to all these things, and many also consider that Gandhi is a politician. He was also playing politics with, and if you.
So do you see anybody, like social workers or Christian society, or somebody working to just, get rid of the class system or discredit it or something?
Yeah, there are many NGOs and many Christian organizations as well as Dalit non-Christian organization and groups that are standing against all these things and protesting and bringing to consciousness that this is what is happening in the society and needs to be stopped. Yeah. Ken.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm also thinking about pollution, and it sounds like in the Indian caste system there's a fairly explicit system of pollution. And as a Hebrew Bible person, I think about the Hebrew Bible and explicit pollution systems there. And it seems to me that a lot of Western Christians believe that Western Christianity doesn't have pollution beliefs. But when you were talking about professions and who does what kind of work, and thinking about race, it seems to me that we do still have
Yes.
comparable beliefs. As you said in answering Neil, the way of thinking, you don't get rid of the way of thinking. And so I'm wondering, and I realize I'm about to do something very American, which is make your presentation about us. But I wonder, when you look around in the U.S., which claims not to have pollution systems, do you see evidence of pollution systems that maybe we don't recognize as pollution, related to race and class? I'm thinking about this morning, Emily Towns was talking about eating situations, and, which is often a site for pollution. Who gets to eat where, and who gets to eat with whom, and who serves the food, and who eats the food. And it's not a very coherent question, but I'm wondering if you can help us think about pollution and race in a more explicit way than we sometimes want to think about it in the U.S.
For a person like me who traveled from India, while coming and when I first came, I thought, I'm escaping the system of caste and many other things related to caste and purity and pollution things, only to realize that I am also stepping into a country where it is in a different shade and color and the way it operates. So yes, the manifestations of discriminating the other, we are giving the ways we do that, discriminate the other, we are giving different names. But I think the effects and the experiences of those who are being subjected to are the same in different countries here. Racial profiling is one thing that is just coming up to my mind, and I was a subject and a victim of racial profiling in this country many times. Whenever get into the airport, especially if I sport a beard or something like that, Satya and the girls would be left and they will go, but I would be stopped only to be searched by 3 or 4 people in spite of saying what I am and showing my IDs and stuff like that. And I also shared with some of my friends few years back when an important lecture was going on in UFC when Dr. Cornel West came. Suddenly I realized that I was surrounded by 6 or 7 UFC cops just moving along with me wherever I go. Until one of my CTS friends came and shouted my name. And these are small experiences, but with a lot behind that to have that undergo. And there are millions or thousands or hundreds of people who are going through here in the US right now. These are few examples. If I get any more, I'll. And as Professor this morning it was saying, even Professor Dr. Thistlethwaite also brought to surface or lifted up the issue of jobs. When you talk about it, this surely comes up. Howard.
Thank you, Solomon. My name is Howard Wiley. I'm in the PhD program here at CTS, for those who don't know me. But I grew up in the South, North Carolina, Southern United States. Pollution was manifest in the practice of segregation because black people couldn't drink out of the same water fountain, go to the same bathrooms, eat in the same restaurants, swim in the same swimming pools. If a black person got in a swimming pool or even in a beach, the white people would get out of the water. Just the idea of a black person being in the same water with a white person. If black people, I know many times even now the practice is if you go to a store and you hand a white, well in that time it was more prevalent, but still you even encounter today. If you hand a white person some money, they won't give the money back to you in your hand. They don't want to touch you. They'll put it down on the counter and make you pick the money up. So I can give some pretty concrete examples of that.
Yes.
From my own experience in terms of just growing up under that kind of system. But I was going to ask you about the racial dynamics of the caste system, because part of the dilemma for me, particularly after Dr. Towns' lecture, I'm trying to think of the word she used, was colorfulness. What was the actual term she used? Anybody remember? Coloredness, which means that everybody, the way I interpret it, everybody has a color except white people. So when the question of racism is discussed, I mean, just like to say it's beyond black and white, to me is really actually, again, taking the question, is really making the white character of racism uninterrogated. You can't talk about it. So that's part of the question in terms of how we talk about racism in a way that we can have this conversation across different countries, different contexts, different cultures. To what degree does whiteness as a category remain uninterrogated or play itself out in other cultures as a form of racism? So that was my question to you in terms of the caste system in India. And just the whole concept of racism itself, can we talk about it without the interrogation of whiteness? And also, just while I have the mic, the question that Dr. Thistlethwaite raises about jobs, part of my concern has been, dealing with this question since a young person, and having these questions around race and racism. But to me, I think the discourse has to change a little bit to more along the line of talking about, because there has been discussions about in the United States of a permanent underclass that is basically racially determined in many ways. So I think that part of what I see in the caste system is a manifestation of what I see in the United States is really is an ongoing form of racial oppression. It's not just race or racism, but actually racial oppression. So those are my comments to you. But my main question is in terms of how does race play itself out?
In caste, yeah.
Yeah, in the caste system.
If you look at the Indian history, India had a history of long history of invasions and colonial occupations. And if you also look at India, we have two different races too. The Aryan race that came from the northwest, and the native, we call them the Dravidian. And the major distinction between two is the color of skin, the Aryan being fair and the Dravidians being dark. And in the rest of the history spanning several centuries, and the development of the emergence of the Hindu religion and related scriptures, especially the Rig Veda and particularly the Manusmriti, which talks about the structure of society and the system of caste, which developed lately after so many years. But by then, the society got mixed up and everything. But again, after the formation of these hierarchies, the social structuring, we see still the Brahmins at the top and the Shudras at the bottom, and the Dalits, untouchables, outside the system. And if you look at, or as I mentioned earlier, even the color of skin varies between different groups, starting at top being fair and at the bottom very dark. So that is there. And at the same time, we cannot, caste-based discrimination is the same as racial, because in caste, as I also mentioned, even people from the same race, because of the caste, they discriminate each other. It's not just based on caste, but not based on race, but based on caste. Yeah, that is the main difference. And in 2001, when the United Nations thing on racism happened in Durban in 2001, a big delegation from India, particularly from the outcast community, they went to Durban to request and to include caste-based discrimination also into these proceedings to be considered, because at that time they did not include caste as a category of the racial thing that was going on in Durban. So I'm not sure if I answered, but again about pollution and things, and about Christology that I'm thinking. I believe that Jesus was polluted and also was a polluter, which forms the basis of my understanding. And based on which I think pollution is a good thing, which is a natural thing. We all are polluted. We all pollute each other. And, things like that. Just few things about what I'm doing. Yeah.
I have a question for you, Solomon. Recently, I believe it was at the beginning of the year, it was maybe 100 or 150 Dalits that were allowed to participate in the Kumbh dip.
Yeah.
And I believe it was an outside organization, an outside activist organization from another country that came in and made this possible. And once they emerged from the water, they were proclaimed to no longer be of that caste. So I'm wondering if that was strictly ceremonial, or will they no longer, go back to the jobs they had as Dalits? Will they no longer live where they were as Dalits? And then also, what is the feeling inside the country of outside organizations coming in to change the caste system when there are so many groups and organizations within the country working to change the system? Are they welcomed? Are they, what is the overall feeling in the country?
Sure. In India, there's a popular sentiment or a saying which goes, you can change your name, you can change your religion, you can change your economic status, you can change everything, but in this lifetime, you cannot change your caste. You are born into it and you die. And in Hinduism, that's when the whole cycle and the dharma of karma comes, that if you do your duty as an outcast without complaining, without protesting, there is a chance for you to, in your next birth, to be born as somebody in an upper caste hierarchy. So, since the 1800s, especially with the on the eve and the emergence or coming of several Christian denominations to India, many of the denominations, Christian denominations that came to India, they came to convert the people. They first thought the strategy, if you look into the Indian church history, most of the denominations, they targeted to convert the high caste people to Christianity, thinking that the rest of India will fall into place, become a Christian nation. It didn't work that way. The high caste people, Hindus, already had established and sophisticated religion and philosophy at that time. They considered Christ as one more incarnation, avatar, but not necessarily for them to change their religion. So the next thing was most of the denominations, they worked with the outcast communities. That's why today 90% of the Christian community today are outcast groups, or more than 90%. Because why they converted to Christianity was with the hope that once they changed to Christianity, they thought that they would escape this system or caste. But unfortunately, you can change your religion but not your caste. And the most unfortunate thing today is that caste even exists in the church. If you go to the early, or look at the early Christian history, and especially if you go into or watch a cemetery, you still see separation between high caste Christian converts and the low caste Dalit or untouchable Christian converts, the graves. They still evolve. These days it doesn't happen, but it still happens. Even at the Eucharist, first the caste convert Christians take, and later the outcast Christians come and participate, because once they take, they are polluting the body and blood of Christ. Today it's not done, but it happens still in many different ways.
So, Solomon, are you saying that even though these folks may come out of the water and declare they're not part of the system anymore, it doesn't matter what they say?
No, it doesn't matter, because you can change your religion, you can change your economic status, you can become. Today, there are many rich people, powerful people, politicians, and everybody, but at the same time, they are considered, oh, still he or she belongs to this outcast group. So that it still goes, the stigma or whatever. Nick.
I have a question. Thank you, Solomon. So for Indians who have migrated to the United States, how do they continue to work against the caste system? Is it kind of, do they still like kind of focus on issues in India solely, or do they then like try and think about, okay, now I'm living in Chicago, and so the comparable but not equal idea here is the racial oppression or something like that, and how would you say Indian Americans are or are not engaging with the movement of racial justice in this country?
Yeah, in the past few years, 5 years that we are here in Chicago and working with the Indian community, we have noticed that the second, third generation, or the people who are born here, they have very little idea or practice the caste here, but the older generations or those who have come here still practice in many ways, especially, as I said, when they are thinking of a marriage for their child or any other things related to a social relationship. These certainly come up, and it still struggles. Even though it's not as intense as in India. When I say India, it's not all India, but caste is more intense in the rural parts, and but in cities and urban areas, it is little bit diluted in a way. And here it is even more diluted in context like Chicago. And here the children, second and third generation, they talk more about their experiences, even though they are born and brought up considered Indian here, and they still go through and talk about experiences of racism here in America as a thing. With my interaction with young people, that's what in their schools and workplaces, they encounter issues pertaining to race more than caste.
We have time for one more question, if there is one.
Yes, Ayana, we're up. Yeah, maybe one more. I said 11:30-ish we'll close, but one. Okay, we'll have two more.
Thank you,
Lisa.
Solomon.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good, thanks.
So you've spoken a lot and helped us to really think about the insidious nature of these types of systems, the caste system of racism. But I also hear a lot of hope in your work and through you, and I'm just wondering if you can speak to a little bit to us, to those of us who struggle to engage in this work and to stay in the struggle. Where are your sources of hope? From where? And Dr. Towns this morning talked about the need to have a vision. So what's your vision, and where do you find sustaining sources of hope, knowing how difficult and resistant to change these systems are?
Yeah, even though it's very difficult, oftentimes not promising, and but still, I believe, along with many other Dalit friends and theologians and communities, that protesting and standing against and bringing to consciousness that this is happening in society with conversation and engagement and expressing solidarity with other marginalized communities and people around the world, and the things that are the positive things that are happening gives hope, along with the hope that we are, as Christians, born and brought up and raised, the Christian hope, which reinforces and helps us in the struggle to move forward and to, Dalit liberation struggle was greatly influenced by several liberation struggles around the world. In Latin America, the Black Liberation Movement, the Black Panther Movement, the Minjung that is happening very much. These are where communities are coming in solidarity to work together and to bring forth ways and means of liberating oneself and the other. So that is one thing that I believe. Yeah. Any other? Otherwise, thank you very much for coming.